Here's a little preview about what you're about to see in this video. So we'll set up the charge ball just like last time, set it to where wherever we look, it'll go. This will work first person or third person, and its damage will scale accordingly. So if you look in the top left, you'll see those numbers. The bigger the ball gets, the more damage it does. Alright, so let's get to it. Howdy folks. So I got a question on one of my old videos, and I went and took a look at the video, and the process I used back then was just so overcomplicated that I thought instead of replying with a comment, I'd just go ahead and update the entire thing and answer the question in the process. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a Megaman style charge ball again. So the way I'm going to do this is I got a clean project. I ain't put nothing in it, done nothing to it. This is Unreal Engine 5, so it should work with all previous versions of the engine because the blueprint system hadn't changed too much between. So it'll work in 4. But I'm going to open up the blueprints, and in order to do this, the first thing I'm going to create is a blueprint interface. Now, if you remember, the blueprint interface is the feature that allows blueprints to communicate between each other. I'm going to call this one bullet behavior _BPI. And I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to create 2 functions inside. The first one is called charge, and the second one will be called fire. I'm going to compile that and close it because we're done with it. Then I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a material. I'm creating the material for the bullet first instead of the bullet because this way when we create the bullet we can just go ahead and apply it without having to come back later. So I'm going to create a material, charge ball MAT. I'm going to open that up, and you can create it any way you want. I kind of want it to be like a blue swirly, kind of like the first one. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to hold 3 on the keyboard and left click for a constant 3 vector. This is basically the RGB wheel. So to let you pick a color, I'm going to go for a nice blue like that. And I'm going to hold M and left click for a multiply because I want to add this as an emissive color so that it glows. And this way I can multiply this color by this constant inside of it in order to adjust the power of the glow. So I'm going to hook that right there. But I don't want to hook it just yet because I want it to have a nice texture to it and swirl. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hold T on the keyboard and left click for a texture sample. Now inside of the starter content, if we go over here to the material expression, that thing, I'm going to click that and I'm going to search for the macro variation. This comes with the starter content and it just has a nice kind of look like that. So I'm going to add another multiply. I'm going to hook this first one here and the RGB of this one to the B, and then hook that right to the emissive color. So now you'll see it's kind of got that cool looking plasma variation on it almost, but it ain't very glowy. So I'm going to update the multiply right here for the constant B. I'm going to bump that up to like 50. That's a nice glow to it. But I also want it to kind of swirl, so the way we can do that is holding P on the keyboard and left clicking will give you a panner. Now this is basically just a little material function that'll let you pan the material in whatever direction you want, across whatever time, and the speed you want. So I'm going to set it up for speed Y. So I'm going to set it to 0.2 on the Y axis and hook it right here to the UVs. The UVs are basically the, like when you're 3D modeling it, golly, like when you're unwrapping the UVs of a mesh, it's the triangles and the polygons and all that across it, basically, is what I'm trying, like I don't have too much knowledge on 3D modeling, but the reason I'm doing it this way is because when I spawn the actual blueprint in the world, it's going to be spinning left and right. If you go on the X, then it's spawning up, but I like it left and right, so you can do it whichever way you want. But with that done, I'm going to come back out to my content browser, right click, and I want to create a blueprint class of an actor. And this will be the actual charge ball _BP. I'm going to double click and open that up. And I want to add two things, one being a sphere that I will go ahead and add that charge ball material to over in the details panel. Yeah, it's going up here, but when we spawn it in the world, it goes the other way. But then I want to add a projectile movement function. So this is basically what will let it be a bullet. Now with the projectile movement highlighted over in the details panel, I'm going to set its initial speed and max speed to 1000. You can set these to whatever fits your game. I'm also going to set the gravity scale to 0 so that it won't fire and then sink. It'll just... So now we need to apply that blueprint interface we made. So in the class settings, I am going to, under the interfaces, add that bullet behavior blueprint interface. So you'll see right here now, this is in here. So in the event graph, we want to create the functions for those interface calls. So I'm going to type in event charge and event fire. So when it's charging, we want it to, first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and set the scale of this sphere down to 0.1, or whatever you want it to be when it first spawns into the world. So for the event charge, we want to do a branch first. And for that branch, we want to find out if the ball is charging. Now when it first spawns, we want to say yes, it's going to automatically start charging. So I'm going to just, leaving this checked, I'm going to drag off the condition and promote it to a variable called charging. And when this is true, we want to drag out our sphere and get its scale. We will get its world scale. Oop, let me just leave that there. I'll drag this up. Then we're going to set its world scale 3D. So when it's charging, we want to adjust its world scale to increase its current scale. So we'll drag off here and do a go to add. In Unreal Engine 4, if you're doing this, it's going to be a vector plus vector. So we will just hook that result right into there and establish that I want it to increase by 0.01 across the board each time. Then we'll add a delay set to 0.01 also, and then we will call that charge function again. Call function charge. Should say target is charge ball BP. Hook that just like that, and that's that. We'll go ahead and establish the max size real quick too. So I'm going to back this up a little bit. So, and the get world scale. So off the return value for the get world scale, because we don't want it to just continue charging forever and ever, we want to find out if it's equal exactly a vector. No. Equal. If it's equal to something. So we want to find out if it's equal to this scale. The float right here is the error tolerance, basically how close it can get before it's like, alright, we're here, boom. So I'm going to set it to 0.01 also. Now I'm going to drag off the comparison right here, promote that to a variable called max scale. And I'm going to compile so that I can default this to 1. Now I'm going to add one more branch, hook this, that, and if it's not equal to it, then we want to hook the false to it so it continues charging so long as this is going. And if it's true, then we want to go ahead and call this function down here, which we'll get to in a second. I'm going to compile that real quick. So now we want to, when we fire it, we want to set that it's no longer charging, which we can right here just go ahead and hook both of these up also. Just go ahead and drag that over a little bit. Then we want to cast to the third person character or whatever character you're using. We'll get the player character for the object. And in order to make it to where we can fire, the first one we did, it only fired in a straight line away from the character. So I'm going to make it to where if you're looking up, it fires up. You're looking down, it fires down. So we're going to drag out and get the follow camera. Now let's drag out our projectile movement also, because we want to set its velocity. And it's right down here, the very bottom one, that's a vector. So I'm going to hook that right there. Now from the follow camera, I want to get its forward vector. And I want to multiply that. Let me double check my notes real quick, because I'm pretty sure I'm saying it right, but let me just double check, make sure. Yeah, follow camera forward vector plus, Alright. We want to, just like if you were doing a line trace, you want to get its forward vector and add, and we want to do a multiply. Now if you're doing this in Unreal Engine 5, it's going to automatically, you want the vector times float in Unreal Engine 4, but if you're using Unreal Engine 5, it's going to automatically make it a vector times vector. But you can change this by right-clicking on the bottom one and convert the pin to float, and it'll let you just do it that way. So I'm going to set this up to 1,000, hook that to that one so that we're adding a forward vector, multiplying it by 1,000, and then hooking that up just like that. Drag this over a little bit. So with that done, I'm going to compile that. And then I'm going to go inside the character blueprint that we want to use, so we can get everything set up in here. So this will work whatever camera mode you decide to use this with. I'm going to make it first person, but it'll work third person, however you want to do it. I just like the way it looks first person. So I'm going to drop my follow camera onto the mesh so that it parents. With the camera still selected, I'm going to set it to the character's head. Zero it back out on the location, and then on the rotation for the X, I'm going to just -90 so that it rotates. I'm going to use the pawn control rotation so that it follows the mouse and sits evenly. And then for the mesh, I'm going to set it to hidden in game, so that when we play the game, it'll be out of the way. Now one more thing I'm going to do is with the follow camera selected, I'm going to add a component that is a scene component. This will be, I'm going to call it fire from, because this is the object in the world that will actually spawn our projectile. This will be where it spawns. So you can set it wherever you like. If you've got a character that holds a gun, you can set it at the end of the gun. It'll spawn right there. Oh, okay. So back in the charge ball real quick, because one thing I forgot is we need to adjust its collision so it's not knocking our character around. So with the sphere selected, I'm going to go into the collision presets in the details panel and set it to overlap all. And we'll compile that real quick. Now in the third person blueprint, we want to go to our event graph. I'm going to get rid of all that. We don't need that. And I'm going to add some events for a left mouse button. Now this is whatever button you're going to use to spawn your actual charge ball. So on pressed, I'm just going to spawn actor from class. The actor is going to be our charge ball, and the transform is going to be the world transform of our fire from component, scene component. So hook that right there. And I'm going to promote it to a variable called bullet. I wanted to make a bullet for my Valentine reference, but I'm gonna rise above the urge. All right. So after we do that, then we want to call that charge message. That way it'll go ahead and say, all right, we're charging. Let's do what we gotta do. But right now, if we try to do it, it's just gonna charge and then immediately fire away. Alright. Okay, so the other reason I like using the scene component is because if it does stuff like that, you can just rotate the thing inside the mesh or inside the blue. There it goes. Well, that's freaky looking, but that's just because it's not fully done yet. Alright, so back in our event graph of the character, we want to update that thing's location. So we're going to right click and create a custom event called update bullet location. Then we'll call it right at the end of this function, or at the end of this, yeah. So what we want to do is we basically want to take this actor and tell it to stay right here until we release. So we're going to drag out our bullet and say set actor location. Then the location we want to set it to, we want to drag out our fire from and get its world location, because we want it to go ahead and stay right there with it. Then we'll drop this down just a little bit, because we're going to use a variable inside the bullet itself to tell us whether or not we need to continue updating its location. So I'm going to drag off the bullet and find out if it's still charging. I'm going to hook up a branch. And then I'm going to set a delay on the is true. So if true, then we'll wait 0.001 seconds. And then we'll call this update location function one more time. That will say, alright, we're still charging. We need to keep it right here still. So now if I check it out, you'll see it's charging up, but if I let go of the button, it's still going to completely keep charging. It'll charge to full and then blast. We want it so that even if you let go early, it'll do it. So on released, we want to find out, is there a bullet valid? Are we currently charging a bullet? So we'll drag it out and say is valid. Hook that right to the released. And if it is valid, then we want to call our fire function. So we'll get the fire message. We'll hook that up, press compile, check it out, and then boom. I want to move it, a little bit further away from the camera. Let me just go ahead and do that. So yeah, let's take a look now. So I can just barely click it and it'll boom, boom, boom. Or I can hold it, bam. And now it's not doing that funky going a little bit and then bam. That was weird. So there's a couple extra things you can do on top of this. For instance, off of the fire function inside the bullet, you could set a little timer countdown with like a delay to where after this amount of time goes by, then it destroys itself, so you don't have them, floating on into perpetuity. But let's say you want this thing to do damage based on the size of the bullet. So the way we can do that is let's add another variable called damage. And we will make that a float. And I'm going to default that to, let's say, 50 for now. So on our event fire, we want to find out what scale this is and then adjust our damage accordingly. So I'm going to drag out not the max scale. No. Alright, we're going to drag out the scale of the sphere. That's right. So I'm going to drag off and get its world scale. Now I'm going to break open the vector. So I'm going to break. Actually, you can right click and just split the struct pin if you want to. Makes it a little bit easier. A little bit neater at least. So since we're increasing all three of these across the same, at the same time, they'll all be equal. So we can just use one. So let's drag out our damage, and we want to multiply that. So drag off it. If you're using UE4, it'll be float times float, and we'll just hook that right there so that it takes our damage and times it by whatever this scale is. So if it's 0.01, we'll get 0.01 of our damage, etc. And let's drag off there, and we want to truncate, which basically rounds it up. If you want it to be percentage based, you can just skip that. This just rounds it to the nearest integer. But let's print the string real quick just to demonstrate. I'm gonna drag that back to there. If you have a bunch of stuff hooked up and you want to go ahead and move its location, you can hold Control on the keyboard and move it around, and it'll grab everything associated. So let's just go ahead and check that out. So it's printing it twice. I don't know why it's because I'm releasing it. Yeah. So it's calling that function one more time on release, so. But it'll just set it to the one time. So yeah, you can see those numbers jumping around based on how big it gets. Since we're using that error right here, you could set this to lower probably. So let's try 0.001. Nah, it's still going to do 49, but I mean, yeah. You could always just add 1 to it to offset if you wanted to. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So now anywhere you look, you're firing that bad boy. It's applying damage based on the scale. And you can't really tell, but it's kind of turning sideways. So yeah, hope it was helpful for you, my guy. Thanks for checking out the channel, and thanks for everybody else who stops by also. See y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.